Good morning, everyone. First and foremost, we want to thank each and every one of you for joining us today for our presentation. We're so excited to be able to present the very first part of this three-part series. And we're going to go ahead and begin today's presentation with a few housekeeping items. So one, the Q&A and the chat box are both open. So if you have any questions that come in throughout this presentation, feel free to put them into the chat and the Q&A, and we will be happy to get those answered as time permits. So for those of you who always ask the question, we definitely want to provide the answer. Yes, a copy of today's recording and a copy of today's slide decks will be sent out to all participants involved. Of course, we want to make sure that you have this information readily available. We want you to be able to enjoy the presentation and not be frantically trying to take those screenshots or those photos and things of that nature. So definitely we will send that over to you. Today's agenda is going to include an overview of the Small Business Administration, a quick overview of SCORE Houston, who is actually our feature presenter today. We have Ray Nix. Go ahead and give us a wave, Ray, saying hi to the crowd. And he will be presenting on identifying your target customers. And so definitely we are in for a treat. I don't want to take up too much of your time with this overview, so I'm going to go ahead and just get started on them. So for those of you who may not know, or in case you forgot, the Small Business Administration, we help Americans achieve the dream of small business ownership. We do this by helping you start, grow, expand, and recover. And here at the local Houston district office, we cover the 32 counties that surround Houston. And so you'll see the 32 counties that we cover here on this map. So what is considered small? That's one of the biggest questions that we always get. Well, it really depends on the number of employees and the amount of annual revenues that your business has. So if you are trying to figure out if you are considered small, feel free to visit our size standards tool at sba.gov/size-standards. So how does the SBA help? Well, we help with what we call the 4 C's, and that is counseling, capital, contracting, and crisis. So let's just quickly touch base on these. You may hear us say the SBA Resource Partner Network. That includes SBA resource partners who are approved and funded by the Small Business Administration. We have about 1,400 plus partner offices nationwide. So if you are calling from outside of the Houston area, I know that sometimes does happen. Feel free to visit sba.gov/local-assistance to find your local resource partners. For those of you who are calling in from Houston, which I'm going to assume most of you are, your local resource partners are the Texas Gulf Coast Small Business Development Center, that are known as the SBDC, SCORE Houston, who we are gracious enough to have on today's presentation, the WBEA Women's Business Center, and the Greater Houston Women's Chamber of Commerce Women's Business Center, and of course your SBA Houston District Office. Once again, don't worry so much about taking pictures of this or anything like that. We will be happy to send you the slide deck at the conclusion of the presentation so you can have these readily available. And next, we talk about capital. So capital is probably the C that you might know us for. The Small Business Administration provides SBA guaranteed loans and microloans that are starter friendly, have competitive terms, lower down payments, longer maturities, and are lower risks for the lending institution to be able to provide to you to either start, grow, expand your business. Maybe you need some machinery and equipment. Maybe you need to purchase or renovate a facility, or maybe you're looking to export. All of this is possible through SBA guaranteed loans. Next is federal contracting. In case that you didn't know, the world's largest customer buying all kinds of goods and services is the federal government, and we are required by law to provide contract opportunities to small businesses. We do this through our federal contracting certifications. Our goal is to award at least 23% of all federal contracting prime dollars to small businesses that are certified with SBA's contracting programs, such as our 8A Business Development Program, our historically underutilized Business Zone Program, our Women-Owned Small Business Program, and our Service Disabled Veteran-Owned Program. Last but not least is crisis, which during the pandemic, you might have heard of us being able to offer disaster loans that are available. Businesses can also protect themselves with an up-to-date plan of action for disasters, because it's not a matter of if, but when, because we know that disasters will happen. And so you can always visit sba.gov/prepare. And every year we do provide billions of dollars in low interest, long-term disaster loans to help small businesses, homeowners, and renters from declared disasters. So that might be something if there is a declared disaster in your area. And this is my contact information. I will be sure to send out the copy of this slide deck and the recording once again, just so that you can have for your convenience and have this information readily available. But you didn't come here to learn only about the SBA overview, right? You also want to know about SCORE Houston and, of course, how to be able to figure out your target customers. So let's go ahead and talk to you a little bit about SCORE Houston, because besides just giving this presentation, they also do a plethora of other things, and they are such a wonderful organization. So the mission of SCORE Houston is to foster vibrant small business communities through mentoring and education. They do this by helping provide free business advice and mentoring to you, offering low or no cost business training, and then they share free business templates on their website. I think one of the greatest things about their website is if you go to their website, which we will provide in the slide deck, you can basically find any mentor that has differentiated areas of expertise. For example, the mentors that we have giving this particular series have expertise in marketing, right? And they'll tell you a little bit about themselves, so I'm not going to steal all their thunder. But who does SCORE Houston help? Well, they help whether you're in research and planning, let's say that you just have an idea and you're looking to get started, or you're opening and you are already a startup, right? Or you're looking to grow your business. You're in that business already and you're looking to grow or expand. If you've been in business a year or more, they can help you in all phases of your business and throughout the life of your business. And so without further ado, I'm going to go ahead and turn the mic over, the virtual mic that is, to Ray Nix from the SCORE Houston chapter. Ray, you want to go ahead and take it away?
Okay, thanks, Elizabeth. Let me share my screen here. Okay, Elizabeth, can you see the my screen?
You are good to go.
Okay, great. Well, it's great to be here. It looks like based on the people that are signing in, we've got a great audience, large audience today. And so we probably have hit on a topic that is of great interest. My slides are not advancing.
You know, what would it be without just a little technical difficulty, right? It's
Yeah,
okay.
Let me stop sharing and then share again a different way. There we go. Okay. All righty. So hopefully that's the end of the technology challenges here. So anyway, my name is Ray Nix. I'm coming to you from West Houston Energy Corridor. I've been a SCORE mentor for about 3.5 years actually now, really helping a lot of clients, small business clients with marketing, and business strategy, and business planning. My career was pretty much confined to the IT industry, IT products and services, with 35 years in marketing and product management. So this topic is right up my alley. I started out with AT&T and worked for a number of other companies that you've all probably heard of. I retired about 4.5 years ago as director of product management for a large infrastructure product line with Hewlett Packard Enterprise. But enough about me, let's dive in. So we're all here because we want to learn how to better promote our businesses, improve the marketing promotion activities to grow your business. Now, that really all begins with a thorough understanding of your customer. And that's why this first topic here is identifying your customer. This is really critical. If you don't get this right, then everything that follows that you do is going to be much more at risk of not being successful. So beginning with a thorough understanding of your customers begins actually with understanding the problems that your business solves. What do your core products and services do for customers? Then identifying the target customer groups that you can best serve by solving those problems. And then finally, developing detailed profiles or understanding the characteristics and how your customer groups act, so that that information can guide your activities. These are this is kind of the agenda also for the presentation here. We'll be moving through kind of these three areas of topics. But along with a competitive analysis, which you're going to hear about tomorrow in tomorrow's session, these steps form the foundation of any successful marketing program for startups and established businesses. So we're going to start out, as we said, by talking about problems, understanding customer problems. And this is an area that you really don't want to gloss over, because your products and services only exist to solve problems and meet the needs of customers. So understanding their problems, their challenges, their pain points, their frustrations, what keeps them up at night, what prevents them from meeting their goals, is all critical to being able to run and be successful in your business. Knowing these lets you really do a great job of knowing what benefits to associate with your products and services, and then how to create impactful marketing programs that will emotionally connect with your customers. It's always important when you're doing this, when you're considering the problems as well as the types of customers, that you start broadly and then click down, narrow the focus. So I'm going to take a quick example here. This is actually based on a client of mine from last year who had an accounting services business. And so let's just say in this situation that you have an accounting service that solves these customer problems here. The first being the need for timely and accurate financial information to manage a business, guide decision-making, and maintain tax compliance. So that's a problem. It's a great problem description, but it's very broad. Most every company has that kind of problem. So let's click down again. So you've also, the idea of this service is really designed to target customers that have a situation where they can't afford to hire an in-house accountant. They may be able to pay for a part-time bookkeeper, but they really can't pay for the in-house expertise of financial accounting. Maybe many of you on this call are actually in that position. So that starts to narrow the focus. The third problem that this service would address would be outgrowing current financial tools causing mistakes and delays. Maybe the company is growing. Maybe they want to become more efficient. Maybe they understand they need to get more out of the software that they're using, but they don't have time to figure it out. So they have a problem in using their current tools and need help. And then the fourth one, which really clicks down and narrows the field even more, is the need to manage the business at the project level. Most accounting services provide services at the firm level, at the company level, but there are some businesses in this particular situation where they're project driven. And so they need to be able to not only manage financially at the firm level, but also by individual projects. So how do we go about identifying customers with these problems? We use a process called segmentation. And it's really about identifying and grouping customers by their common needs, wants, and interests and characteristics. Why do we do this? Again, we do this because different customer groups require different marketing programs and messages. They often need different products, different services, different prices, different distribution. So this becomes a foundation for narrowing your customer focus to target the most profitable opportunities. And if we take a look then at going back to the example that I was talking about, this client actually narrowed down the focus of her business based on these problems to small architectural engineering and construction firms. And you can look at those and see how they relate back to those services or those problems that we identified. The unique thing here is that they are all project driven. So they need to be able to manage at the project level, and they're all small. So they have, they need to outsource, and they're growing. So they need, they need to improve their tool use. So this identifies the different groups who face all the problems that you'll solve. You're not done though. The next thing is you need to actually describe each one of those groups in detail so that you can better understand who they are and what makes them tick, and actually then be able to prioritize, because you may actually not want to or not need to go after all of them. So the process that we use to do that is called a segmentation framework. And you'll want to think about the types of typical customers that you have or expect to have, and understand how they're the same and how they're different, so that you can position your products and services and communicate properly. The basic structure here includes 4 categories of attributes, and you can see they're very similar, whether they're consumer or business, in terms of the categories themselves. But underneath, there's a lot of difference. So looking at the first category would be demographics on the consumer side and firmographics. These are typically more statistical, more socioeconomic in nature. So you can see on the consumer side, you'd be concerned about what are the age groups, income levels, race, religion, education, those kind of characteristics of each of the different customer groups that you would identify. On the business side, you think about firmographics, which are revenue, number of employees, industry, different buyer roles and titles. The next category would be psychographics. And this is where it really starts to get a little more interesting, because this classifies people and organizations based on their attitudes and aspirations. It's much more intangible. And you can imagine 2 people or 2 organizations with similar demographics or firmographics, but having very different needs and making very different purchasing decisions based on their psychographics. So on the consumer side, it's lifestyles, it's values, personality. And on the psychographic side, it's more the business style, the industry leadership, their stage of business, whether they're conservative or innovative. Those are all key things that you'd want to use to characterize the different groups that you have and drive different marketing messaging to each one of them. Thirdly is behavioral, and that's really about attributes that describe how consumers or businesses interact with your business. So on the consumer side, it's how do they use your product or service? How loyal are they to it? How aware are they? For what occasions do they use your products and services? On the business side, same kind of things, but you also get into purchasing processes and cycles and that kind of thing within businesses, which make them more complex and different. From a geography standpoint, this is obviously, it's pretty obvious. It's where people are or where organizations are, and also the characteristics of those geographies. So culture and climate come into play here. So in many cases, you'll look at your different customer groups and try to use these characteristics to describe them, to profile them. But in many cases, you won't actually need to use all of them. Use the ones that are most pertinent to your business. One or more of them may stand out, particularly when you get to the psychographics area, is really important for your segments and may even form the foundation for naming of each one of your customer groups. You'll see an example of that more later on. So we want to identify customers. We want to profile them using that framework. Where do we get all this data? If you're already in business, you really have an advantage because you have a number of relationships and processes already in place. The first place to start in trying to identify who your different customer groups are and their characteristics would be your own personal experience. Most of you as owners or have key roles in your businesses and have long time experience with the different customers in your market. That's a great advantage to have and really a necessity, obviously, for business success. Another area, which is a real gold mine, is if you have any kind of sales or service organization within your company, they're also a great source of information. They're dealing with customers every day, and they can help you identify the groups and the profile. You always want to collect data directly from customers as well. So no matter how good your information is or how good your information is from your sales and customer service people, you want to use web-based surveys, in-store surveys, pop-up events, phone surveys, focus groups to collect information directly from customers so you can make sure you're hearing it from the customer's mouth. And also, very importantly, you learn their language. You learn the terms that they use so you can really relate to them when you get further down the road in your messaging. You can even create a customer advisory panel. Pick some of your best customers in different groups and ask them to be on a panel. It really rewards them for being loyal and is a great source of information. There are a number of websites and social media tools that you can use, like Sprout Social and Google Analytics, to collect information about customer groups. There's another great source that's usually free and sometimes or very little cost, are data from trade associations and publications. Go on the web and search for organizations that are representative of the types of customers that you have, that you're targeting. And they will often, if you contact them, they will often have information that will be helpful to you. You can also look at your competitors' marketing. That you can draw a lot of conclusions about what kind of customers are in the market by that source. And then finally, you want to really start developing the discipline where you, within your customer relations management, your CRM system, or wherever, start classifying and categorizing your customers going forward. So when you have a sales transaction or a service support transaction, capture that information from them and get it into your database somehow so you can use that in the future. Now, if you're a startup or entering a new market, it's a little more challenging. You don't really have a set of customers or salespeople that you can go to right off the bat. Your first task is to find the customers who have needs that match the problems that you solve, that match your offerings. You can use surveys, you can use interviews at events to profile each one of them. You might think of businesses who have related products and services and speak with their owners or speak with them to collect data from their experience. You can in some cases, for instance, in a lot of retail or businesses that are kind of geographically constrained, you can go outside of your area and talk to people that would be, or organizations that would be competitors, to get information, and maybe they'll share with you. That does work. And then you can also obviously research again for publications and associations for sources of information. If you have a big budget, which not sure if anyone here has, but there are consultants that can help you with segmentation using all kinds of surveying and statistical analyses and focus groups. This is not typical of the small businesses, so we'll not spend much time covering that today. But the main point that I want to make here is spending the time to do this right is really critical. It makes a difference, and will be well worth your investment. It's a key to understanding your customer. So let's say you're going to prepare for some data collection internally to your internal sales or support people. This is a list of the types of questions that you might want to ask or put on a survey. You want to prepare for data collection. You want to get the right information. You want it to be accurate. You want it to be relevant, and you want it to be complete. So the first thing to do is to create an interview guide using questions like these. This is not something you just want to wing. It's especially if you have a team, more than just yourself collecting this information. So you want to think about this in advance. You want to create an interview or discussion guide that will ask these kind of questions. Describe the kind of customers that you deal with on a daily basis. What backgrounds do they have? Your salespeople will know which ones are their highest and lowest value in revenue and profitability. They'll know frequency. They'll know what the customers buy and why they buy it. They'll know, importantly, what problems do you solve for each of them. And you really want to make sure you're validating that to make sure that you understand, your understanding of the problems is actually what's reality. You also can ask them if they have similar or different demographics or firmographics. What are the common and unique psychographics, lifestyles, business styles for each different customer type? Are there patterns in your customer's behavior? How do they make purchases? How knowledgeable are they? Do they require consultation? So is it a value add sale or not, or more transactional? Do they require different terms? What post-sale support do they require? What's their geography? So, this is a list of questions that you might ask. I'm not saying it's complete, but it's a good start. But you want to make sure that there's consistency and structure to your data collection, and yet allow for flexibility. So if you're having conversations internally, if you have a conversation where somebody is much more willing to give you time and information, and you can probe and go down different paths, feel free to do that, but make sure that you're at least covering the basics here. So as I said, it's a great advantage if you have internal information sources. Take advantage of them. They will generally be very transparent and willing to invest the time with you. But when you go external, talking to customers or industry experts, make sure your discussion guides are very succinct, because external sources are less likely to invest time and less likely to be as transparent. So you may not get in all these questions. Figure out which ones are most important and focus on getting those. If you're a startup or an existing business, introducing new products to new markets, you'll need to qualify potential buyers of your product or service before you interview them. The key is finding customers and collecting the information from them. Leverage relationships that you have, like your sales reps, your existing customers who may have knowledge in these adjacent areas that you're not playing in now. You'll need to network, and you'll need to be comfortable really doing some cold calling. You can use targeted email lists, face-to-face interviews at pop-up events or trade shows are really excellent, especially for starting out early when you really want to, ask a lot of questions and really hone in on the key key customer segments and profiles. So in this particular case, if you've got consumer topics, you can see some of the questions that you might ask here. This is a kind of a brief set. You're going to have to start off, again, validating that they have the problems that your solutions address. And then you can go on from there to collect information about, the four categories of the segmentation framework. Business topics, very similar, except they'll have an organizational context. And, you want to collect data for organizations as well as the purchasers and influencers, the buyers. So you need to kind of cover it at two levels when it comes to businesses. Now, some people have asked, how many interviews do you need to do? Well, you really need to have for each customer group that you're identifying, you need to really have at least 5 to 10 interviews, and the more the better. If you can do more of that, that's great. When it comes to interviews for business associates, trade associations, or whatever, it's as many as you can get. Okay, so once you've done your interviewing and collecting your data, your raw data, then you want to have a structured way to be able to, adjusting something on my screen here. And I didn't mean to do that. So let's get back up there. Okay, so there are really 3 simple ways or steps that you can use to analyze your data and define your customer segments. And it really starts by assembling the people that have been doing collecting the information. That may be just you, or it may be a couple or a group of people. You want to assemble them and then use what's called an affinity process to analyze your findings. And what that means is you simply have each person write down a brief description of the groups of customers that they have on Post-it notes. And you go slap them on the wall. And then as a group, you go through and look at all of them and then put them into different clusters based on, common characteristics for each. You can see in this particular in step 1 here, maybe we had 9, we started out with 9 Post-it notes that, identified different customer groups that the data collectors came to the meeting with. But after we looked at those, we consolidated them down to just 3. There were really just 3 unique customer groups out of that 9, from that 9. So once you've done this and you have your mutually exclusive groupings, you've got your working set of customer segments. And once you've done that, you'll need a tool then to start drilling down and creating those profiles, the detailed characteristics for each one of those groups. So there's a simple tool that you can use to do that. You just build a simple worksheet to capture data. You include all the relevant attributes on the left-hand column. And remember, only include the ones that are important. Exclude those that aren't. Then you want to create a column for each individual customer group. Then go in and fill with the data collection group, go in and fill in all the information, all the cells to describe each one of these customer groups by each one of the attributes. When you're done, you can look at them and analyze them, and it's a good idea to come up with a name for each one of these groups. The third step is really just going back and analyzing what you've done and making sure that you've really got the groups combined to the right level. Maybe you actually need to break some apart. But you want to get to the point where you've removed most of the overlap, not necessarily all of it, but most of the overlap between the different groups. There's no rule on how many segments a business needs, but remember, you're trying to get to improve your marketing promotions. You're trying to become more efficient at marketing and selling and even building products and services. So a long, complicated list of target customers may be counterproductive. You'll need to determine which ones have the most profit opportunity, and that will allow you to meet your financial goals. Now, if you're a startup or very small, you may want to focus on a very small set of segments, maybe even just one or two. It's never a great idea to try to sell to everyone. The world is not your market. You need to focus and learn and gain experience and do really well, penetrate a small number of segments initially, and then you can grow from there. So Elizabeth, this is kind of a good spot to stop for questions.
Awesome. So we do have one question. So how do I create a client database as a professional organizer?
How do I create a finite database?
A client database.
Oh, a client database. Well, you know, a lot of the customer relation manager tools that are available now, if you want to, if you can afford, pay for that kind of software, they have the ability to you know, edit those databases and add information that you want for each client. I mean, you're basically going to have to take information from each sale. It's best if you have a software tool to be able to do it, and they're available. You can get on the web and search for those. If you can't afford anything, get started just using, you know, an Excel spreadsheet. But a very manual process needs to be one that's used temporarily, because if you're successful, you will outgrow it and it will not be very efficient very quickly. So you can either use a kind of your own spreadsheet. You can use software that's available on the internet, or you can use your CRM to create that database. I hope that answers the question.
It's a great answer. I think one thing that I did want to mention as you were going through this presentation was also, if you are looking, I know you had mentioned earlier about, you know, market research and how some small businesses may not have access to these bigger databases. For that market research, I just want to reiterate, I think this is a really good time for us to say the Small Business Development Center does have some market research tools available to small businesses that are available to you to be able to help in managing that type of information, such as the psychographics and the industry analysis and things of that nature. We do have one other question. It talks about, how do I gain clients? That's basically the question.
Well, that sounds like kind of a sales.
Yeah, it's a bit broad.
That's a pretty broad statement. Yeah. You know, you really follow the process that we've talked about here. You understand what problems you're going to solve, and then go find customers using the techniques. I mean, what we've described here is a technique for market research, for marketing, but you can use a similar approach to actually, you know, trying to identify potential customers.
Thank you. And that would be the same answer that I would give regarding, we had another question regarding the best way to get customers in a specific industry. And it's the same answer in terms of how to gain clients. Yeah,
if you're looking at kind of what we call vertical, a specific industry, there are a number of things you can do. You can go to trade associations if there are ones. A lot of these different groups have associations that they're involved with. So that would be a good start. You can buy email lists. in some cases for different types of industries. You can use census data. Go to the library. The library has public libraries in Houston and around Houston have a lot of information about even customers within a given market area. Kind of beyond the scope of this, and maybe that's a follow-up kind of presentation.
Definitely, thank you.
Okay, so moving on then, we've gotten through our process of defining who our customer groups are, who our targeted customer groups are, and profiling them to understand what makes them tick. So let's look at a couple of examples. And we'll start by looking at this hiking products segmentation. This is one that you can imagine an REI or a North Face company might have done using the techniques that we described here to come up with these basic 4 distinct groups, identified mostly by their demographic, psychographic, and behavioral attributes. You can see there's some overlap between them, but not a whole lot. And only geography is not used. That maybe they found that was not relevant for the type of work that they were doing. You can imagine that their data collection started out with a lot more information, and they've narrowed it down to these 5 key attributes that you see on the left side there. And those attributes very simply and succinctly describe the 4 target markets that they're going after that align with their business strategy and their resources. So if you look at them, mountain men and women, GQ, scouting families, and nature lover kind of people, it's one thing that really strikes out at you here is that they have really simplified the description of their 4 key markets. And it's very easy to understand who these key groups are. And you remember I mentioned naming each one of the groups. So they come up with names for each one of these 4 groups that really makes it easy to think through and remember all the different characteristics, whether their attitude toward hiking, their life stage, their discretionary income, their usage, occasion for usage, and the benefits that they seek. So if you think about, kind of the hardcore hikers, you'd immediately think of some of those attributes, as well as for the GQ and the others. So even though these are large enterprises, you can see that they've developed target customer groups that are very simple and very easy to use for a marketing campaign. You want to get it down to very simple, easy, because the last thing you want is a complicated, confusing marketing campaign. And if you don't make it simple here, it gets more difficult down the road to achieve that goal. Let's look at another example here. This is an art supply products segmentation. You could think this might be for a retailer that might be doing this. They might have, again, used the same data collection and affinity process. The data could have come from the owner, could have come from salespeople on the floor. It could have come from people running the cash registers. But at any rate, they've identified 5 targeted segments here. And you can see in the top of each one of the boxes, there's some demographic information. Again, simple, not very extensive. And then most of the remaining attributes are actually behavioral. They're covering how the products are used and how each segment interacts with the business. So for example, the artist, all of the wants listed here are behavioral within, going back to the segmentation framework. You look at what they want. They want high quality product. They want experienced staff to guide them their product purchase. They want access to non-standard product. you know, if you think about an artist, they want to do something different. They want to be innovative. And so they want help figuring out what tool, what paintbrush or what tool on the floor is going to help them do something specific. They want fast access because maybe they're in the middle of a project and they don't want to, you know, they don't want to sit on it. They want to keep it moving. And they're a repeat customer. So you can see from that, it's a very good characterization of the artist. You see the age range is pretty wide, but they all have those same basic characteristics. Let's look at another one, retiree. This is a little bit psychographic and behavioristic. So they're, you know, a person of 60 to 85. They're learning something new. So that's kind of a psychographic lifestyle thing. They've retired. They want to spend time, you know, creating a new hobby, which would be painting or something, some craft thing. But they want experienced staff to guide them. They're not as knowledgeable about the products that are available. They want classes to learn how to do what they want to do. And again, they're a repeat customer. So you can see how these descriptions of each one of these different customer groups can be used to target and make your marketing promotions very efficient and effective. These segments have been, they've got different attributes. They're boiled down into succinct descriptions. They're simple, they're manageable. And again, they've only used, you know, the most relevant attributes. So we looked at that laundry list, big list of attributes in the framework a few slides back. They've really honed in on what's really important. Now let's kind of change things up a little here and look at a business example. So in this particular example, we're talking about document transfer services. So a courier service. If you're a startup courier service, you probably don't have access to the full range of businesses who use courier services in your area. You're probably not going to be able to, you know, service law firms and medical clinics and labs and printers and title companies. They all, you know, they all have some different needs. So you're going to want to understand them better. You're going to want to narrow your focus. You might, for instance, take a look at law firms to start. You want to understand what law firms are in your area. You want to understand what are the different kinds of law firms by different practice. What are their problems? What are their characteristics? What are their requirements for courier services? Who do they currently use? What methods do they currently use for document transfer? Who are their current vendors? From there, you'll be able to begin determining which ones to target and how to create marketing programs to attract their business. In this hypothetical case, we've narrowed down law firms into 3 groups within this particular area. We've got, you know, 3 different kind of services offered, actually 2 services and different size, making 1 and 2 different. And you can see from the standpoint from service usage, they're quite similar, but their frequency of use is quite different. I meant to say the usage is quite similar, and their volume or frequency is quite different. Their vendor requirements are also kind of similar, but they do have some very distinct differences. Getting through the formal vendor qualification process that you see down under number 1 for a large firm might be difficult for a small startup courier service. Meeting the certification requirements of a medical malpractice firm might also put them out of reach. And the required service areas are very different. So if you look at this and start, you're understanding the different groups, the characteristics, And now another important part of this whole exercise is starting to prioritize and figure out which ones you can target. Out of this, number two, the small personal injury firms might be a good startup target for this particular venture. Now you need to do additional research to really fully understand their problems, their additional requirements, and the competitive environment. So you can see why it's really important to divide your customers into smaller homogeneous segments, to prioritize your targets so that you can sharpen your messaging and your services to grow in the areas that your firm has capabilities and aligns with your strategy. Really important. So now, as you identify your customer groups and choose your targets for focused marketing activities, there are several things that you want to keep in mind, several criteria for what are good customer groupings and what are bad. First of all, you want to make sure they're identifiable. You need to identify customers in each segment, be able to identify them, and you need to be able to measure their characteristics, their demographics, their usage behavior, the things we talked about in the framework. They need to be substantial. It's usually not cost effective to go after small targets. You need to they need to be big enough that you can really make a profit from. So you'll need some market and customer sizing data here to help with that kind of evaluation. You need to make sure that each one of your groups that you decide on is stable. The segment needs to be stable enough for a long enough period of time that you can invest in them, market to them, and make money and be successful. They need to be accessible. Sounds like an obvious criteria, but your company should be able to reach these customers through the channels that are available to you. They need to be differentiable. So the people and organizations in each individual segment should have similar needs. And when you look across the groups, you may find some overlapping characteristics, but expect to find more unique characteristics for each one of your groups. And finally, and probably most obvious, they have to be actionable. If you're unable to provide, to sell, to identify, sell, and distribute to any group your products and services, then it's probably not a good definition. So once you've completed defining your customer groups, you'll want to prioritize them so that you can use your marketing promotion resources most efficiently and effectively to grow revenue and profit. Kind of like we were doing in the courier example where we were prioritizing segments. Just because you've identified a segment does not mean you need to focus on it. Like in the courier services example, there were two that we identified, but they didn't make sense. Some lower priority groups will not be worth investing in. Even as attractive as they may sound, it may just not be cost effective to invest in promotions for them. But if, however, you're solving their problems, you'll likely get some business from them anyway, because they'll find their way to you. You just don't want to specifically focus your precious and limited marketing money on cultivating those particular segments. So the smaller you are, or the earlier you are in your business life cycle, the more you'll need to focus. I can't stress that enough. I have many clients that come in and the world is their market. And you just cannot be successful, particularly if you're going to run an effective marketing promotion program to have that approach. You got to narrow it down to customer groups that you can really be successful in. You need to figure out where the low-hanging fruit is and make those your top priority to kickstart sales. And if you're a startup, you definitely want to focus on a small number, even just two, one or two, so you don't spread yourself thin. Take time to be successful in a small number of groups, and then grow from there as you learn more about them and more about delivering your products and services. So you can see here, several criteria. We've talked about a whole lot of them here that that you can use to prioritize your segments. But again, you'll need to think about this as you collect data on your customer groups. Make sure that you have the kind of information that you can use to actually do your prioritization. So a next logical step after you've completed your segmentation, your grouping work, is to really develop personas, or sometimes called avatars, for each one of them. That's what really makes your customer segment come alive. So avatars or personas are a combination of customer attributes and information about what makes them tick. It helps you see the world from your customer's perspective. It talks about who they are. It talks about the challenges they face. And it helps you, it shows you how to help them solve their problems. It helps you create interesting, relevant, and valuable marketing content that your customers will care about. And that's important. If you're doing the right work here and you're relating it back to their problems and back to the emotional attachment that they have to the situation, you will be able to create programs that customers care about. So customer personas then summarize the data that you gathered in your market research, and it summarizes them into stories basically that tell you what a day in the life of your customer looks like, what their major challenges are, how they search for information, how they make decisions, how they or some of their common objections that they have to your products and services, their purchasing experience that they desire. Depending upon whether your customers are consumers or businesses, will kind of differentiate the way you write your personas. So here's a list of the kinds of things that you can put into a persona. In the interest of time, I'm going to not go through each one of these in detail. When you get the deck later, you can look at them. But these are all great things to be included in a persona or an avatar. And keep in mind that not all the potential information about your customers, again, will be relevant to your particular situation. Make sure that the insights you gain from your customer analysis and add to your personas are, again, actionable. For instance, if knowing how many kids your consumers have wouldn't change anything, then you probably wouldn't include that kind of information in your segmentation or in your persona. So this is a really nice example of a persona that I found on the internet, and that you can go out and find a ton of these, and also, again, a number of tools and companies that will help you do this. But this is for a buyer persona for a residential real estate firm. And this persona, Barbara, might represent one customer group for this real estate firm. And here you can see her describe demographic information on the left there. You can see a brief bio. You can see her top problems, her pain points. You can see her expectations of the real estate service and the agency. There's a nice quote in the upper left that is included, and that's an excellent way to express a customer's emotions and needs in their own language. And that's really important. As you go through your data collection and your research, you really need to be attuned to how the customers talk about their problems and needs and use those same words. And this is a great way to be able to capture that in a quote from the customer. So this is an excellent example of how you should, of how a persona can actually force you to create a useful story from this, maybe mountain of customer data and turn it into simple information that can guide your marketing promotions. Even to the point, as you see down there in the telling you the different channels, communication channels, and how they prefer to get, how Barbara prefers to get her information. If we take a look at a business example, you have a customer persona for a company that offers a project management tool here. And in this situation, you've got Shauna, who's the CEO of a marketing agency. It's very similar to the consumer example. You have a lot of the same key demographic information, such as their age, location, education level, but you also start getting into information about the organization. And so, one of the biggest differences between customer and business personas is the more in-depth information about the person's role in the company and their buying process. So for businesses, you want to understand the person's title, and that can help you figure out how much influence this person has in the procurement process and then the final purchasing decision. The customer's industry knowledge is important. You may have a new product, something that's innovative, something that's going to disrupt the market, and the market may not be very aware of it. So that's going to tell you, whether you need to, how much you need to go educate. How much does the customer typically know about about these solutions, about your competitors? Have they ever used a similar solution? How much education do you need to give? And in this example, we know that, as we said, Shauna is the CEO, so she's a key decision maker. She is, really in a growing situation and providing digital marketing services. And she's growing to the point where she's added people and she needs help because she's stretched. She's outgrowing her current methods and tools, and she's having a hard time delegating, being involved in the day-to-day business, but realizes that she still needs to, develop the business, grow the business, and develop, focus on strategy and all. So this persona, if you read it in detail later, shows how that information can be used to then go create a marketing promotion program to go after this particular type of customer. So as I said, these are two examples. There are lots of them you can find, but I hope you can see here how this takes a lot of information and puts it into a very useful form that's very marketing friendly, shall we say. So I know we've thrown a lot at you. This is a good place to stop. It's a nice transition point for tomorrow's session on value proposition, branding, and messaging. So to review what we've talked about today, it's really the importance of knowing several things before you start planning your marketing promotions. You need to know your customer. Need to know the business, the problems that your business solves, and the customers who have those problems. You need to identify those customer groups and narrow your focus to target the most important ones. You need to understand their characteristics of each of those target customer groups in detail. And also then use personas to succinctly summarize those customer groups. Remember that it's really important to do your homework here. You can't wing it. Again, detailed information is critical so that you can, when you summarize, you can get to the right story. You can have the right information. Don't skimp. Keep it simple, but keep it adequate. Make sure it's adequate. make sure you validate your results. We've kind of gone through a process of talking about how you collect data, but you want to, every time you get to a point where, like when you've identified your target customers and the key attributes of those target customers, go back and validate it with some customers to make sure you got it right. And as you go along in business, continue to do that. Periodically update this information on an annual or whatever kind of basis, because it will change over time. So I want to thank everyone for taking the time to listen to us today. Again, we have about 160 SCORE mentors here in Houston and the surrounding area that are available to help you with your business, whatever stage it's at. And you can go to the website score.org/Houston to get information, to find mentors, to see what webinars are available. And after that, I guess, Elizabeth, I'll turn it back over to you for any questions that we have.
Thank you so much, Ray. It was such an insightful presentation. So great. I am going to open up the floor to questions. But before we do start with the questions, I do want to give you some wonderful comments that we've had in the chat. They're just saying such wonderful presentation from Ray. Are we getting the slides? Yes, as a reminder, you will be getting the slides. Loving all the great examples. Great presentation. So let's go ahead and talk about some of the questions that we have in the Q&A. So one of them is this stage where you reconcile your target market and their ability to pay for your service? For example, sometimes your target market can't afford your service because you have a minimum price in order for you to be profitable.
At that point, I think you need to make a decision about whether they're your target market. If they can't afford your solution, then they're probably, you either need to change your solution or move on to another group. I mean, that's kind of without knowing more information, that's kind of the short answer.
Yeah, and I definitely, as a former counselor, what I would tell clients would be, they have to be two things. They have to be willing and they have to be able. So just because someone's willing to purchase your product or service doesn't technically mean that they are able. So that's where you would kind of come back and decipher whether or not, like Ray said, they are your target markets. Great answer. So next question, I am considering starting a financial coaching business. Do you have any tips for clarifying the problems that my business will be solving from the customer point of view? Any resources for this analysis?
The thing I always tell my clients, the best thing that you can do is go out and talk. Go out, find some of those people that you think have that problem and go talk to them. That's really the best solution. You can either find people that have, potential customers that have the problem. You can try to find people that actually sell other services or sell to them. You can go to trade groups. All those sources that I talked about are places that you need to go, but at the end of the day, the only way to really answer those questions is to just do some cold calling. Go find a place where you think your customer is going to be, your target customer. Trade shows, if it's a business kind of thing, or if it's more consumer, pop-up events, flea markets, whatever, and go just hang out and talk. Set up a table and do your questionnaire, your interview guide, and talk and get smarter.
Having real conversations. Who would have thunk it?
Yeah. And that's not easy. I mean, it's like, sales cold calling in a lot of cases. It's stressful, it's hard, but you got to do that to be successful.
Yeah, definitely. That's a really great way. I know that one of the comments was networking, testimonials, warm leads, requests for proposals, partnerships with companies that have similar clients. So those are all really great examples of ways to also be able to go in and do that. So one of the questions that we got was, seems like about 4 segments is about right from your examples. Is that like the average? Is that about right in that sense?
To be honest, I have no idea. I think, you know, well, I have no idea. I mean, if you're small, 1 or 2 or 4 is probably good. But you know, you looked at those hiking products. I mean, big companies involved there, and they still narrowed it down to 4. So, you know, 4 or 5 is probably a good manageable number. It makes sense. When you start getting into more, then, you know, it just gets more complicated.
Yeah, I think that is awesome. That is exactly what I would have said as well. I think for that portion, it's more just the fact that you don't want to say everyone is my target market. So
Right.
narrowing down that, whether it's, 4 or 2 or 1, but overall coming back and like she said, I can drill down too much. Yeah, so just not going back and saying, okay, not everyone is my target market, but also not only this person is my target market.
Right.
One of the questions we got, and I do want to reiterate, we will be sending out a copy of the slide deck. We will be sending out a copy of the recording. And yes, that will include the upcoming sessions for the upcoming series, the upcoming 2 series that will be. I cannot talk. So yes, that will include the links to the 2 upcoming webinars in this series, and will help you in being able to understand how to be able to register for those if you haven't. I also just want to reiterate, one of the questions that we had in the chat was, and you'll get a kick out of this, Ray, is, can I be Ray's mentee?
No problem. Just go into the SCORE website, and you know, my profile is there. You can ask specifically for me if you like. I'd be honored.
Definitely, we'll make sure to send out that. Yeah, we'll be sure to send out that his contact information so that you can reach out in case that is something you are interested in. I don't see any other questions as of now, but if you do have any questions, feel free to put them into the chat in the Q&A. I do want to just share this upcoming webinars in this series, which are going to include part 2, which is developing your value proposition, and part 3, which is creating a communications plan. So this webinar is packed with information. It's giving you a ton of tips, a ton of techniques, things that you want to kind of consider as you're going through this process and making sure that you are ready for your marketing efforts, not only in 2023, but just in general as a whole for your small business. Can you still hear me?
Yep.
Okay, great. I lost it for a second, but I am sure it came back. So definitely making sure that you guys have this information readily available for yourselves. Ray, do you have anything else that you want to touch base on? I can't seem to get a hold of the chat or the Q&A. If you are able to, feel free to see if there are any other questions in there.
I don't see any others. Again, I thank everybody for listening, and I wish you the best luck in, you know, following up and making all this that we talked about happen.
Awesome. Yes, definitely. Awesome. Well, thank you so much for joining us today on today's presentation. We truly appreciate your time and attention, taking time out of your busy schedules to be able to be with us on this wonderful topic. We want to thank Ray so much for all of the plethora of information that you shared with us today. We're so excited to be able to share this with all of the attendees. Once again, we will be sending this out to everybody. And if you do have any questions, feel free to reach out to us. We will be happy to try to get you an answer. We'll see y'all tomorrow.